We got everybody good and ready to go?
Hi, everybody.
Hi, sorry my presentation isn't going full screen. I don't know why it's being dumb, so we're just going to scroll through. But welcome to Show and Tell Master Level Costumes. Let's start with we're just going to scroll up introduction slides. Hi, I'm Eveille Cosplay. I'm from Southern Pennsylvania. I've been cosplaying for about 18 years. My day job is a video game developer. I love making competition costumes, and I recently got second overall for the C2E2 qualifier, which is why we're doing this. So I did that, and I have a couple Best in Show wins under my belt as well. So that's me.
Hi. Yeah, we didn't. There's nothing on me for the slides because I was so frantic trying to do my panels that I had zero brain power. So I'm just gonna say hi. I'm Sarcasm-himé. I have been cosplaying for 25 years. I have won a whole bunch of Best in Shows. With this costume, I won the New York Comic Con qualifier and then the U.S. National at C2E2. I embroidered it for 2 years. Do not recommend. I don't know what I was thinking.
And next.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay. I'm Lunar Lyn. I'm from Phoenix, Arizona, so I came kind of far. I've been cosplaying for about 14 years. It's kind of blurry at this point. I've only been making my own costumes for about 10 of those years. I wanted it so badly, and now it's some kind of crazed hobby. I have a BFA in painting that I don't use. Well, I do use it, just not in a professional capacity. I love competitive and craftsmanship cosplay. That's like my favorite thing ever, and I love talking about it. I love talking shop with people. I love competing. I did this insane 11-person Sailor Moon musical group that won Best in Show at WonderCon in 2019 before the end times. Great time. And then I recently, was that last month?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wait, 2 months ago, won the Chicago Regional at C2E2, and then I got to compete against Sarcasm-himé for the
It was kind of
US
a blur.
It was a blur. Yeah, I was like
the way that
shaking.
C2E2 does it, we're like, okay, we're doing the regionals. These people, everybody goes, and they're like, okay, you guys won. Okay, now get off the
Now go up
stage.
there and
Now
compete with
everybody
other
else gets
people,
on
yeah.
stage. Okay, now you won. Now get off the stage. We have a whole bunch of new people.
So in one night at C2, they picked the Chicago Regional winner, which is what I got, and then whoever wins that goes up against all the other regional winners, of which she was the New York winner, and there were 2 other people. Whoever wins that then joins the international circuit, and everyone that flew in from a different country competes all on the same night for
Just
the
bam,
world
bam, bam,
champion
right after each
yeah.
other.
And it's a lot, so that was a whirlwind. Anyway, thanks for coming, by the way. It's really late, and I appreciate you guys coming.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
You go first.
Oh, I'm going first. Okay.
Yes, you are.
I wish I could. Is there a handheld? Does that work?
Oh,
So
yeah.
I can look at the slides. Test. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay. So my Queen Amidala Red Throne Room gown. I have put her in a slideshow 2 other times in the last couple of years, and I finally get to say that she's done. It's always been like she's not done yet. Okay. Take it back. 1999. My mom and I bought the doll and took it apart and kind of remade a costume based on it. And ever since then, I was like, oh man, if I ever get good at it, I want to remake it as best I can. So I did it 25 years later. So it took me about 60. I started it in 2018, and I didn't work on it straight that whole time. I would work on it for a few months, then I would shelve it, and then I would think I would get it done, and then I wouldn't, and I'd shelve it. So it took a long time, and it's okay if it takes a long time to make something. Sort of. It's also kind of a burden. Anyway, so to research this, the Rebel Legion has a lot of links for places to look at screen accuracy, which isn't always important when you're making a cosplay, but it was what I wanted. So I really wanted to try to replicate it as closely as I possibly could, within reason. I couldn't find some of the actual materials. They used all silks. I could not find the right silks, for example, but I made it work. I still used the same kind of weave fabric, it's just polyester. I used different thermoplastics. I used metallic embroidery thread, which was horrible. The lanterns I actually bought and learned how to vacuum form over a sculpted busk to get those. It's like a ladybug shape. There's some EVA foam. There's polymer clay. I use different casting materials, and lots of snaps. Okay, so this is kind of my process. Early on, I used Illustrator actually to, I took a picture of Natalie Portman in her costume, and she's 5'2", so she's 2 inches shorter than me, and I actually sized it up for a 5'4" person as best I could, and I used that to kind of scale everything mathematically, and then I took the lengths and widths, and I used trigonometry to get the circumference and the diameter for all the different tiers of the trumpet shape. And it's all to scale for me. So like people have been like, would you consider making and selling a pattern? And I was like, I can't. It wouldn't work for everybody. It just wouldn't work. So that alone took weeks, and I suffered over it. That wasn't even the mock-ups, but the mock-ups were a whole other thing. I think I'd touch on it in a minute. But I started with like the foundation garments with that in mind, building on top of that, because you have to think of the understructure in order to complete the rest of it. So it was just like this big, like I would like zone out at work thinking about how I'm gonna do stuff, but like for years. Okay, you can go ahead. Here's some of my mock-up craziness. Holy shit. What?
The sleeve.
Oh yeah, oh my God. So the dress wasn't the hard part necessarily. The hardest part was getting the trumpet shape to land correctly on the ground, because if you were even half an inch too high or half an inch too low, it didn't look good. That was really hard to get. It would either bunch or it would float up too high, and then the lanterns were swinging rather than laying against the hoop skirt, if that makes any sense. So that was kind of a pain to get down. I did like over 20 different mock-ups of the sleeve because it's really insanely tricky. It's like a wizard sleeve, but weird. And there are 24 panels in the dress, and there are 12 panels in each sleeve, like vertical panels, and between each panel is piping. So you had to make all those panels with the piping, and then I had to remake it again for the lining. It's like all that sewing just like took forever. So yeah. There's the dress. It has just like a yoke at the top that I just kind of drew on my form, and I just had to make sure where it connected to the panels was the right length, so it would land right on the ground. All I see is trauma in those pictures, so if you have any specific questions later, I'm happy to answer.
I think all three of us see trauma.
I'm just like, oh God. Yeah, there's not much to say except oof. Okay, so this is my favorite part. The embroidery, I used Hatch to digitize it, and then I had to fiddle with the sizing because it was slightly smaller on Natalie Portman, and I sized it up just a little bit for myself, and I just had to mess with it until it looked in proportion, I guess. And I actually decided, instead of embroidering straight into the red fabric, I made appliques, because on the original, I don't know where they found, some of the stuff they found were literal just antiques at like a flea market that you'll never find another copy of again. So I just decided to try to fake it and make appliques, and I like the effect that it has. It looks really cool. There's actually, in the longest part of the tabard, in the very bottom, is a really heavy washer. I just dropped it in there because it kind of helps it hang with like a weight. So there's a literal weight in there, like a piece of metal. The very top collar, it's really hard to see in that picture, but there's, I think you say it vermicelli, but it's a squiggly pattern. And I tried to just kind of copy how they did it from the film version, but I hand stitched down like a silk cord, like a hand-twisted silk cording in that pattern. So you can go up and look at it after, but that took forever, and it hurt my neck, and I had to go to a chiropractor. It was awful, but worth it. And something that's kind of weird about this costume that you don't see in the film is that it has a weird like faux hood in the back. There's like two different parts. There's an under collar that's the hood in the back, and then the top collar tucks into the hood. So it's got this just weird design. It's kind of, this specific costume is inspired by like Manchu and Chinese imperial fashion. So they had like things like fur trim, you kind of think of like Mongolia. And of course, like the red is very symbolic in Chinese culture. So I really love it. And I did try to do a bit of historical research to kind of honor that. Okay, you can go ahead. Oh man. Yeah, so I touched on how I did the lanterns. You can kind of see, I started with a flat image that I had perfectly scaled to the dress that was scaled to myself. And I used that to make like a crumpled up aluminum foil core. And then over that, I sculpted polymer clay to make it smooth. And I baked it and I sanded it. And I used that on a vacuum former, and I used PETG plastic. You just kind of heat it up till it starts sagging, and use welder's gloves when you're using melting plastic. It's very dangerous. And you just take it over, put it over the vacuum form, and it sucks the plastic down over that shape. And then with a saw, I just cut around. I left a lip that I could attach snaps to, and it snaps to the underside of the dress. And I used puck lights, because I don't know how to do actual like lighting, but they look really cool, and I was really happy with how it turned out. Yay. Oh, I should say, they're stained. They were just clear plastic. I stained them with a stained glass. It's a stain. It's kind of like a gel. You put it in the form, and you kind of swish it around and cover the inside of the plastic. And it was too transparent, so I took my airbrush and I just kind of like spritzed the inside with like a pretty golden orange to kind of make it more opaque. And yeah. Oh God, okay. I don't want to take up too much time, but so here's my headdress. I want to say this was the worst part, because I love sewing, but like props and 3D things are a bit more challenging for me, and they're really intimidating, so I tend to leave them for last, and that's obviously a big problem. If you want to know more about that, come to Cosplay True Crimes on Sunday, and I will admit some things to you. Anyway, so the form of the hair, I call it the hair roll for lack of better terminology. It looks like, I don't know, a crescent roll. It's pink insulation foam, which is very easy to carve, but it's also very easy to destroy. So you have to be careful and seal it really well before you do any type of painting or anything. Pink insulation foam does glue together with, I like using Gorilla Glue. Maybe some foam glues work, but that's the one that I have found is really, really strong, and it won't melt the foam at all. So, tip there. I did seal it, and then I chose to spray it in Plastidip. I'm not sure why. I think I was just like, everything else is Plastidip, so I just I did end up painting it the color of the wefting, so if there were little gaps you couldn't tell later on. The headdress itself, I suffered over what to make it out of for like years, and I decided to do a EVA foam base, and then I actually used a thermoplastic called Thibra. I don't know if I recommend it. It worked really well, but it's very finicky because it's sticky and it's so moldable. It melts instantly, almost to like silly, like really warm silly putty. It's so easy. Like, I live in Arizona, so I cannot leave this anywhere warm. It will melt, and that would be devastating. But I wanted it really soft because to get some of this texture that kind of like you see in the film, and I think they did something really similar. They use little metal findings, like little rectangles. You can get them on the internet, like really thin. I don't know what kind of metal it is, but
Usually brass, I think.
yeah, probably just brass. I depending on where I place those, I would kind of bend them a little bit to contour them, but I would just kind of lightly heat up the fibra and just kind of lay it in there, and it created this texture. I wish I could zoom in because I have an image somewhere in there, maybe it's later on, of what the texture looks like without all the gold leafing. It looks so weird, but it had the effect that I wanted. So I ended up doing all of that. The solid gold pieces underneath the red lace is actually just foam that I dremeled and sealed, and I used real 24 karat gold leafing because I just really thought it would give it like a richness that I really couldn't get with a paint. And there's kind of a learning curve. I don't know if I would do it again. You don't have to seal 24 karat gold leaf, but if you do, it will resist scuffing. So I did choose to do some sealing on the like little ear cover parts. But the silver leafing you have to seal or it will tarnish. But it does kind of like get rid of that luster. So pros and cons, but I'm happy with how it came out. Yeah. Is that it?
Yeah.
Yay,
That's it.
the end. If you guys have questions after, please ask me. I'd like to talk about it.
Do you want to go next? Or do you want me to go next?
I don't know. I guess I can go.
All right. Do you want this?
Yeah. So as mentioned, we don't have slides for me, so I'm just going to talk. So I made this stupid thing. It does not, I didn't bring the hoop because I didn't know we were doing like a whole display thing. So she's looking a little saggy. So please overlook that. Also, this dress form is not my body, so it doesn't exactly fit right. But anyways, so this is a replica of a piece of artwork drawn by Colleen Doran for the graphic novel Snow Glass Apples by Neil Gaiman. I had fallen in love with this art years ago, and this was kind of like a bucket list project. Hilariously, 4 years before I made this, I had just finished a giant embroidery project, and I was like, I'm never going to do anything that crazy again. Yeah. So the artwork is very like graphic and black and white lines and stuff, so I wanted to interpret it in just like mostly embellishments because I thought it would be cool. And then 2 years later. So most of this is actually a stretch. It's like a faux suede with a very slight stretch, and I chose that so that the sleeves specifically would be like, because they're very snug in the art, and so I wanted to be able to replicate that, but be able to have some movement. So the sleeves do not have a lining except at the wrist. And then this area here is underlined with a stabilizer, but then the bodice is fully flatlined. So all the areas, some of this is applique. So some of these pieces, they're tambour embroidered, then appliqued on top. Some of the embroidery is done directly onto the bodice. If I were going to do it again, I would do probably all of it as appliques and not embroidered directly on the bodice, because doing any kind of heavy needlework onto something shrinks it slightly. So it fit perfectly on me before I did all that embroidery, and it fit slightly less perfectly after I was done. So lessons learned. But most of this is gold work or tambour embroidery. I do not know how many beads or supplies that I bought. I still have a lot left over. The skirt is flatlined with a cotton poly broadcloth something. I did not do a full lining because this thing is heavy enough as it is, and I have a hoop skirt and a petticoat underneath it. I had to extrapolate. I had to make up what the back looked like because the art is just from the front, so I made up what the back looked like. And a lot of the fun of this costume was interpreting a 2D art and just kind of like making up what techniques I wanted to use, because I didn't want it to be just like one giant blob of embroidery. So a lot of this was like, okay, I have these black outlines that I did in couched cord, and then I'm like, I need to fill them in something. So I was just kind of vibing of like, okay, so this part I'm going to do, little silver beads, and the part next to it therefore cannot be little silver beads. We need to put something else there so that there was like a lot of visual texture going on. And so, when you can come up and look, you can see there's like different things next to each other. It's all a similar color scheme, but I tried to put a lot of variety so that it would still read as interesting. And in the original art, she has her cape kind of sweeps in front of her, and there's this big red sweep in front of her, but in the art, she's like 9 feet tall, and I am not. So I decided to interpret that by making the cape lining red and making that thing that is in the front as the cape lining. So here's the cape lining. I embroidered the whole thing like a smart person. So that's the inside of the cape. Here's the outside of the cape. It's really heavy. And so for the cape motifs, so it's the faux suede and then it's velvet, and for all the motifs, I basically drew them out on Photoshop, planned like how the layout of the cape was going to be, and then like printed out my pattern for all these appliques. So this is like a satin that I made these appliques out of, and so I painted the outlines of my appliques on the satin with a silver fabric paint so that it wouldn't fray. And then I just cut along those lines so I didn't have to like turn anything under, because I knew I was going to be embroidering on top of those appliques. So for all the outlines, when you see it up close, you can see that on the outlines of all these appliques, I've couched cords to cover the edge. And so that basically secures the applique down and also covers the edge just to keep it neat. And it's one of my favorite things to do. I love couching cords as outlines. It makes everything look pretty. And so basically, this is all, I had, some of this, well, okay, all of these motifs are from the art, but I had to move where they were because it's like one artwork where everything's kind of just going this way. So I was interpreting it. And the cape is, as mentioned, very heavy. So I actually have a harness that I wear underneath the bodice, and there's straps that come out through a hole in the front of the bodice. They go over my shoulders and they hide underneath this neck thingy, and then they buckle on. The cape buckles on in the back so that I can take the cape off if it's too heavy. And the neck piece, this I had to make my own ermine because you can't find nice quality fake ermine anywhere. So it's rabbit fur with little pieces of black fur sewn in. And I embroidered the back of the neck piece where no one would ever see it because I have a wig on when I wear this. Again, like a smart person. This has a Warbla's Cobra cast inside. It is a thermoplastic that basically, it's like a fusible interfacing, had a baby with Warbla. So you can fuse it to fabric, and so that's what's keeping this shape in here. It's very, very handy. And how are we on time? Are we good?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. My stupid hat. Okay. So this thing, I had to do a lot of brainstorming of how I was going to, because she has this like giant spiky halo, so I had to sort of interpret how I'm going to create a giant spiky halo. These are all, they're like wooden, like barbecue sticks. So, but I wanted it to be really stable. So, I'm just going to yell. So, what's going on here is I made boss shape, which is a felt that shrinks and hardens with heat. And so I have one of those wig heads that are like the fabric kind, the canvas kind, so they can take heat. So I basically shaped the boss shape onto that, and then made sure that it was going to fit my head, and then use that as the base. And so these spikies, actually, there's lace along the edge of the headpiece, and the lace has little holes that you can place. So I ran the spikies through the holes of the lace, and then there's like a base under here that is hiding, and so they're actually secured into the base, and then I covered this on the back. So they're secured lower than the point that they're attaching here. So this attachment point along the edge is basically securing them further up than just at the bottom. So if they were just at the bottom, they'd fall. So that was the plan, and it seems to be working really well. The other great thing about boss shape is because it's like a felt, you can sew right through it. So all of this embroidery was done through the boss shape.
Oh, wow.
So I basically just like painted it in the base color and then drew my pattern onto the boss shape and then embroidered straight onto it. I beaded these bezels, and some places I ran out of ideas for what to fill that area with, and I just like put some glue, gem tack glue down, and just like dumped some beads in. So yeah, when you run out of, and this is like surprisingly comfy. I can just pop it on.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's very light and very comfy. The other one thing I ran into was Steph and I had perfectly without the wig, and I realized that wig makes difference. So then I had to pop some Warbler on the inside, and like basically while it was still warm, like jam it onto my head with the wig and be like shake, shake, shake. So that was the last minute fix, and then my little heart. I will turn you on. And I think that's good. Okay.
All right, and I'm going to go last. So I worked on my Zelda from Twilight Princess. I used a lot of different techniques on this. It's something I try to do with a lot of my costumes is I try to like show a variety of skills when I create something for a competition. So for Zelda, I started out with her undergarments. There's a corset, which is not on that dress form because it wouldn't fit that. So that's up here.
I'll move this guy out.
Yeah, let me move this because otherwise I'm going to smack it with my hands, with the top of my hands. And then there's also a petticoat underneath. The petticoat, I used a existing pattern for like the outer layer, and then I did a couple layers of organza underneath, just really simple, just so you get that A-line shape of the dress. So the dress itself, I patterned it entirely from scratch. I did the figured out how to do the inverted pleats, which that was an adventure. And it's actually two pieces. So the cream color dress underneath is completely separate than the purple top. I made them two separate pieces, so they're both fully lined. And for some of the details, like the The trim at the bottom was done digitally on like my computer. Then I transferred it to silk dubioni, which was put on heat and bond, then cut out with the Cricut, then applied, then sewn down, then rhinestoned the edges to finish them instead of doing satin stitching because I hate satin stitching. I embroidered all of the appliques at the bottom by hand, so I think each one took me like 12 hours to do each. As I hate myself, but also because I love doing hand embroidery. And they're also beaded, but you can't really see, but when you get up close, you'll be able to see it, because I used some white beads to create some like dimension when you get up close. Then I did all the runes hand embroidered on it as well, and actually the dots on the runes are little seed beads instead of doing a stitch, because I'm like that. And then for like the closure in the back, I'm really happy. It actually has the white dress has a zipper underneath, and then it's all hook and eyes that close the back. And then you have the weird crisscross, because for Twilight Princess, there's no explanation other than she has just these crosses in the back for ties that don't have ends. So I had to hide them inside of the dress. So that was fun. Then I decided to embroider the gloves too, because I hate myself as well. So I fully embroidered those. I drew out the pattern and I transferred it to some cotton that I had, did the satin stitching, and then I also beaded around them. And then I did rhinestones for the top of the gloves because I like sparkle. The tabard was gold work because I wanted to try a new technique, and that was my new technique for this costume. The gold work on this costume took almost as much time as all of the embroidered appliques at the bottom of the dress. It tells you the difference in time it takes to do gold work versus just regular old like embroidery. Yeah, this one in front of looking at me because she knows, she understands. This one understands.
Yeah, especially the cut work. Because with like what she's doing here, it's a lot of cut work where you're cutting the little pieces of springy wire, and you have to cut them exactly the right length. So you have to measure them, and that takes so long.
It takes forever. So I actually did this tabard twice, because the first time I did the couching at the bottom, I messed it up. Thankfully, I had dyed a full yard of that silk dubioni. But to do the tabard, I actually drew it digitally first, so I pulled her references into my Procreate and was able to get a perfectly symmetrical pattern, which I then scaled and printed out until I got the size that I wanted, and then I transferred it to my fabric, and then I went from there. And then for like the raised areas, those are actually padded out with felt and fleece, and that's how I get that like raised dimension on it. So for all the accessories, the majority of them were sculpted in 3D because that's what I do for a living. So I know how to sculpt in 3D. So I don't use Blender or anything like that. I use Maya and ZBrush on my work computer because I have access to those programs. But so I did all of it sculpted. Everything is printed in resin. So I used my resin printer, and then I went ahead and did tons of sanding. Resin doesn't have as many lines as FDM, but you still have to sand the heck out of it. So I would usually sand it, then I use just the Bondo spot putty as what I use as my filler and any cleanup, and then I do some more sanding, and then I use some filler primer as well and more sanding. The earrings are one of my favorite accessories. I think you can see them over there. They're somewhere over there. Somewhere. Where are they hiding? There they are. So the earrings are actually, I did sculpt these as well, and they're actually cast in a flexible resin with a piece of wire in them, so you can actually bend them around your ear.
They're rubbery.
Yeah, they're like rubber, so it's like a flexible resin. And it's got just silver mica powder in it to color it, and then I just hung some beads on a chain to get the like red danglies that she has. So that was another new thing I taught myself how to do. So I had to make a mold, a silicone mold, and I cast it, the resin in the silicone mold, and I also did all of the gems as well, so they're all cast in resin. And the shoulders were just made out of foam. I used Camelweave's pattern as a base, which I then modified because she has a pattern very similar to Zelda's shoulders, but it wasn't exactly what I wanted, so I used that as a starting point, made a paper mock-up until I was satisfied, and then I moved on to the actual foam, and then all of it is foam clay for all of the raised details. I sculpted all that by hand, except for the very tiny edging details. That is fabric paint, that little 3D fabric paint, a couple layers of that. So I created that little detail. The wig, the monster. So this is two wigs put together. because Zelda has a lot of hair in this costume. She also has a really dumb hairstyle. It's really awful. So I actually cut apart an entire wig and put all those. I did not sew the wefts in. I glued them in, which is totally a viable way to do it. Instead of hand stitching them in, they still stay just as well. You don't have to hand sew them, and a lot of people nowadays are using glue on everything in wigs, so why the heck not? And then I had to do this pull back at the back here, and it's a ponytail to nowhere, because it literally goes behind like her crown, and then it's like there's no hair hanging from like that ponytail that where it's pulled back. So I literally had to pull the two sides back and glue it down and cut it, and then I hide it. Yeah, look, if you want to see, you can see it's just a seam back there. And these are held on with magnets that are sewn into the wig, and I had to use some really strong magnets because this is so thick, like just having enough strength to hold the 3D prints on, because resin prints are heavy, was a pain. And then the top part of the original wig is actually what these are. So like where the hairline was and everything, where it's not wefts anymore, it's all the plastic, I cut that all off and turned that into those and stitched those into the wig. And it's wrapped in ribbon, and then more 3D prints for all the accessories to add more weight to it.
This thing is heavy.
Yeah, if you want to come up and hold it so you can see what kind of torture I go through, you can. I don't have it with me, but I did make her sword. I also 3D modeled this. It was in 8 pieces. I had to print it in 8 pieces. It all fit on my resin printer in one go, and I actually built it so each piece slotted together, and then I epoxied everything together, and then I filled and sanded it multiple times until I got it perfectly smooth, no visible breaks in it whatsoever, and then, prime painted, all that good stuff. It's in one piece, and the only way I can travel with it is by bringing a rifle case if I can't drive, so that stayed home. And then the cloak, which is back here, I'll bring it down. Why not? Because you can see the sparkle. Because Zelda wears this in like one scene at the beginning of the movie or the game. It's fun.
Here.
So all of this is appliqued on here. So I did this all digitally as well, and it's the same technique I used at the bottom of the dress for the pattern there, and then I rhinestoned all of it because it's dumb, and I like doing rhinestones. It's also made of velvet, yeah, and it gave me an epic cape drop at the show, so that was fun. I had my grandmama, it's me, Anastasia moment. I did little Chinese knots for the knotting on the front instead of me, so I wanted to show something else for that. I made the ties for it, and then the scarf as well. And the scarf actually just snaps in the front instead of completely tying around. So it's like seamless where it snaps, and it makes it really easy to put on and take off. And then the edge is just some heat on, for it. And that's the last thing I made for her. And then Lynn was kind enough to put some pictures of all of us at the crowns right there.
I just remember when you were talking about having to go to the chiropractor because of your costume. I gave myself an RSI from all the embroidery, and when I went for physio, and my physiotherapist is asking me, she's trying to get me to describe what it is I'm doing with my hands. And because I was having wrist pain, and I'm like, okay, well, I have this hand over here, and I have this hand over here, like this. And she's like, how long are you doing that for? I'm like, I don't know, like 5 hours at a time.
It's like, why?
Like, yeah, maybe don't do that.
So if you all want to come up and take a look at our work, you're welcome to. We'll also answer any questions that you guys have. So.
Also, real quick, I forgot to mention, part of this competition is that you have to do insane build books, and I went all out on mine, and I brought a couple copies if you want to glance through them. I'm super proud of this build book, so thanks, guys.